nobody could have predicted the chaos that broke out at the much-anticipated Love and Hip Hop reunion. What was supposed to be a glamorous celebration and closure swiftly turned into an explosive disaster that left fans stunned and cast members reeling. The drama between Yandhi and Rashida was supposed to be the main focus. But nobody anticipated that Mondays would end up in the middle of a violent storm that ended with handcuffs and flashing police lights. Emotions ran high, tempers flared, and what began as a heated argument between old friends turned into a full-scale brawl that shocked everyone on set. Could cut it with a knife. And when security didn't intervene fast enough, things took a dark turn that nobody could reverse. As fans watched the cast live on social media, rumors began to circulate. And soon the headlines confirmed that the unthinkable happened. The men of DC were arrested for allegedly assaulting Rashida during the reunion taping. How did things go so quickly? What caused this shocking moment? What does this mean for the future of hip-hop and love? Stay tuned, because you won't believe what transpired behind those closed doors. Fans had been waiting months for this moment to finally see their favorite stars reunite and work out all the drama that had been simmering behind the scenes. But no one could have predicted how quickly things would get out of control. From the moment Yandhi and Rashida locked eyes, there was a tension that made everyone in the room shift uncomfortably. Rumors began to circulate that old wounds were about to be reopened, and even the producers couldn't have predicted how badly it would end. Rashida, trying to remain composed, sat rigidly on the couch while Yandhi made a point of sitting right across from her, with her arms folded and her eyes narrowed. It didn't take long for the petty jab to start coming. Yandhi accused Rashida of talking behind her back and of betraying their so-called sisterhood for fame and followers. Rashida responded with equal vigor, hurling accusations of manipulation and phony friendships into the air. The audience gasped, and the reunion host made a valiant attempt to refocus the conversation, but it was too late. Men who had been sitting off to the side immediately grew tense. He detested seeing Yandhi in any kind of distress, especially in public, and everyone knew that he had a short fuse when it came to protecting his family. At first, he remained seated, his jaw clenched, his fists tightening on his lap. But when Rashida got up and stepped toward Yandhi, pointing a finger in her face and raising her voice, something inside MNBC snapped. Fans who were live streaming the event captured the exact moment he got up. His face twisted in anger, and witnesses described how quickly everything happened. When the host yelled for Rashida to back off, she turned to face him and refused to back down. Words were exchanged loud enough to drown out the host's desperate pleas for calm. And then, in a flash, Mency allegedly shoved Rashida so hard that she stumbled backward. The entire set went into chaos, with some cast members rushing forward to pull Mendices away, while others attempted to assist the stunned and enraged Rashida. Security eventually managed to swarm the stage, separating everyone as accusations and screaming filled the air, and Yandhi showed signs of shaking. Though the reunion, which had been planned as the season's biggest event, is officially over, the drama was far from over. Within minutes, police arrived on set, lights flashing, radios crackling, and fans outside the studio. Rashida, meanwhile, demanded that the police be called immediately, shouting that she wasn't going to let be swept under the rug. Backstage, tempers continued to flare as friends and family members of both sides began arguing, some even coming to blows themselves. Started filming as uniformed officers pushed through the crowds to enter Mendices' now slightly calmer, but still tense. According to reports, he first attempted to explain the situation, claiming that he had only acted to defend Yandhi and that things had gotten out of hand. But with Rashida pressing charges on the spot and multiple witnesses supporting her version of events, the officers had little choice. Handcuffs were placed on Mendices' wrists as cameras captured every tragic moment. And she could be heard sobbing as she pleaded with the officers to reconsider. Emotions ran high as innumerable live streams, tweets, Instagram stories examined every aspect of the explosive altercation. Meanwhile, fans, celebrities, and industry insiders all responded with hashtags like hashtag Justice for Ida and hashtag Freeman BCEs, which trended within hours. Some fans expressed outrage at the man's actions, calling for him to be banned from the show and even face serious jail time, while others fiercely defended him, arguing that he was only trying to protect Yan Dandy and that the situation had been blown out of proportion. With her face still red with emotion, Rashida went live from her dressing room just hours after the incident to tell her side of the story to thousands of fans watching in real time. She insisted that she had never threatened Yandi physically and accused Mendesk of overreacting and assaulting her without cause. Producers frantically tried to figure out how to salvage the reunion episode and handle the growing public relations nightmare. She also promised that she would press full charges and take the matter to court if necessary. Yan Dundee, for her, partook to social media to post a tearful video defending Mendesk and urging fans to understand the situation. "He was just trying to protect me," she sobbed, wiping away her tears. "But things got out of control. But he's not a bad person. He's not a violent man." Her words sparked even more debate, with some fans supporting her and others opposing her, accusing her of allowing toxic behavior. As the evening went on, more information surfaced, revealing that the powder keg that exploded during the reunion was the result of months of tensions between Yan Dandi and Rashida, fueled by behind-the-scenes drama that never made it onto the show. Jealousies, betrayals, and covert alliances all contributed to the powder keg, with cast members who had previously been friends now taking sides and the entire Love and Hip Hop family appearing on the verge of disintegration. Mendesk spent the night in jail charged with assault and awaiting he had fought so hard to rebuild his life after previous legal troubles. And now it seemed like everything was at risk again. According to sources close to him, he was devastated by what had happened and deeply worried about the impact on his family and career. Outside the courthouse, Yan Dandy was reportedly inconsolable, blaming herself for the entire situation and terrified about what the future held. The following morning, a small group of supporters gathered, holding signs and chanting slogans in support of men, and the media poured in. The atmosphere was tense as everyone waited for the next chapter in this unfolding drama, and as the judge called Men VC's case, the courtroom fell silent, leaving fans worldwide holding their breath in anticipation of what would happen next. The cameras flashed as Yandi arrived, looking exhausted but determined. Rashida too arrived, surrounded by her team, her expression hard and unreadable. The courtroom was packed, with every seat occupied by reporters, fans, and worried family members who had come to witness. Rashida watched with a steely gaze, refusing to show even the slightest hint of fear or hesitation. As Mendesk stood before the judge with his head slightly bowed, the weight of the situation evident on his face, and Yandan sat in the front row with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, tears threatening to spill at any moment across the aisle. The prosecutor wasted no time in painting a grim picture of the events at the reunion taping, characterizing Mendesk's actions as aggressive, unprovoked, and the prosecutor stressed the need to set an example, arguing that violence could not be tolerated, especially in high-profile public figures with influence over millions of men. However, DC's defense attorney presented different picture, insisting that Mendesk had acted in a moment of emotional overwhelm, believing Yandi was in real danger. Dangerous Rashida's team had provided video footage from backstage angles showing the moment Mendesk rushed forward and shoved her. The lawyer pleaded for leniency, asking the court to consider Mendeski's character, his efforts to reform, and his devotion to his family. The judge listened intently, occasionally glancing at Mendeski's furrowed brow, tension crackling in the air so thick it was to breathe. After several agonizing minutes, the judge finally spoke, announcing that Mendesk would be released on bail but would face serious charges going forward. A collective gasp reverberated through the courtroom as Menzi's mother clutched her chest and muttered prayers to herself. Outside the courthouse, chaos broke out as reporters pushed microphones into the faces of anyone who wanted to speak. Rashida gave a brief speech to the crowd, adamantly declaring that she would not be intimidated and that she would see this case through to the end. Nobody, no matter how famous they are, gets to put their hands on me without consequences, she said, in an unwavering voice. Meanwhile, Yandi's social media erupted once more as fans dissected every aspect of the court proceedings, questioning whether Menk had actually intended to harm Rashida, or if he had simply lost control in a heated moment. Celebrities also started to weigh in, with some supporting Rashida and others firmly standing with Yandi and Menezes. The drama split the hip-hop community, with friendships breaking down under the strain of picking sides behind the scenes. And hip-hop producers faced a nightmare when the reunion episode was aired, supposed to be the season's high point, but now they were dealing with a real criminal case that was directly related to their show. Rumor had it that the network was thinking of canceling the entire episode out of concern for the backlash and possible lawsuits. Contracts were being reviewed, meetings were held late into the night, and the franchise's future appeared to be in jeopardy. The men DCs, who were now out on bail, withdrew to a private location with Yandandi and their family. On the advice of his attorneys, he refused to speak publicly. But those close to him described him as devastated and kept playing the episode over and over. The mood was heavy, and he kept thinking about that moment. One friend said that he wished he could take it back, saying that he never wanted to hurt anyone, but he just snapped because he thought Yandandi was in danger at home. Despite her best efforts to be strong for her kids, she was plagued by constant fear and uncertainty. Would Menezes end up back in prison? Would their family be torn apart again after fighting so hard to rebuild? Every time her phone buzzed with a new alert, her heart leaped into her throat. The media was relentless, rehashed old charges and painted Mendisk as a repeat offender. As the days went by, more revelations surfaced, and leaked messages implied that there had been simmering tensions between Yandandi and Rashida long before the reunion. Rashida embraced the spotlight by giving exclusive interviews that detailed her side of the story and emphasized her belief that no woman should ever have to fear for her safety, especially in a professional setting. She became a symbol of strength and resilience to many fans who flooded her social media with messages of support from brands and organizations that promoted women's empowerment. The powder keg atmosphere was exacerbated by accusations of betrayal, jealousy over endorsement deals, and even personal slights involving family members. Insiders claimed that producers were aware of the animosity and had purposefully put Yandandi and Rashida together on stage in the hopes of boosting ratings with fireworks. This revelation sparked an even greater uproar, with fans accusing the network of putting the cast in danger for drama, putting profits before people's safety, and even calling for the show's boycott. Due to increasing pressure, the network issued a carefully worded statement apologizing for the violence and promising to review safety procedures going forward. However, for Men in DC, the damage was already done, and his reputation, which was already weakened by his previous legal issues, was severely damaged. Partnerships and endorsement deals were reevaluated, and there was even speculation that the network might cut off all ties with him. Friends described him as falling into a deep depression, hardly speaking, and spending hours staring into space, haunted by even as the world seemed to be turning against them. Yandi remained fiercely loyal and refused to leave many in the midst of the chaos. She posted heartfelt messages on social media asking fans to pray and understand that is not who he is. She wrote that he made a mistake, but that he is a good man, a good father, and he deserves a second chance. Rashida, however, remained unmoved and continued to press forward with the legal case, determined to see the men in DC held accountable. At one point, Tensions between their respective camps reached a boiling point, and a heated altercation almost broke out between members of their entourages at an industry party. Security had to step in before fists were raised, indicating that Rashida was even considering filing a civil lawsuit for emotional distress and reputational damage. If that happened, the consequences for Men could be even more devastating, potentially, costing him millions. It became evident that the feud was no longer just about Men. The battle between VCs and Rashida had escalated into a full-fledged conflict between two influential groups in the hip-hop industry, and as the trial date approached, both sides dug in their heels. Rashida hired one of the city's best lawyers, who was notorious for his brutality in court. The men's legal team rushed to gather character witnesses, expert testimony, and any other evidence that might cast doubt on Rashida's version of events. The stakes could not have been higher as fans eagerly devoured every leaked court document, every mysterious Instagram post, and as the trial date drew nearer, tensions only increased, emotions became more volatile, and the drama became more explosive. The morning of the trial dawned gray and heavy, as if the sky itself understood the weight of what was about to unfold. Insider rumors suggested that the future of men's lives, as well as possibly the future of love and hip-hop itself, hung in the balance. Everyone wanted to know if Mendes could turn his life around or if this was the end of the road for one of reality TV's most complex stars. Tension inside the building crackled like static electricity, making even the smallest movements feel significant. Men first arrived in a simple dark suit, his face somber but composed, and Yandandi was by his side, her hand tightly gripping his offering. Hours before the proceedings were scheduled to begin, some held signs supporting Rashida, while others rallied behind Mendes's reporters, vying for position in an attempt to get a glimpse of the two main players in this real-life drama that had captivated the country. The trial began with opening statements that immediately set the tone for the battle ahead. Their family members walked solemnly behind them, their faces masking worry and determination. Moments later, Rashida entered the room with her legal team and close friends. She was dressed in a crisp white outfit, and her expression was unreadable, projecting an air of calm defiance as their eyes briefly met across the courtroom. The air between them seemed to freeze, thick with unspoken anger and betrayal. DC's lawyer countered with a story of miscommunication and misplaced loyalty, arguing that Mensi had acted out of fear for Yandi's safety, reacting instinctively to a perceived threat. He reminded the jury of Mendes's efforts to turn his life around after past mistakes and urged them to consider the context rather than passing judgment on him. He spoke passionately about the necessity for public figures to set an example, emphasizing the physical and emotional toll the incident had taken on the victim, who had been attacked without provocation. A producer acknowledged under cross-examination that tensions between cast members had been purposefully stoked to heighten drama for the cameras. Another crew member claimed to have overheard Rashida threatening Yandandi earlier in the evening. But under intense questioning, he seemed unsure of the exact words. Based on a single heated moment, witnesses started to take the stand, each testimony adding new layers of complexity to the already tangled story. Rashida herself was a strong presence on the stand, speaking clearly and passionately about the fear she experienced when men from DC rushed toward her. She detailed the physical impact, shock, and humiliation of being attacked in front of her peers and a national audience. Her voice cracked as she described the aftermath, the sleepless nights, the anxiety, and the public scrutiny. Tears welled in her eyes, but they did not fall, demonstrating her resolve to not appear weak when it came to being attacked. When it came time for Mensi to testify, the room held its breath. He spoke slowly and carefully, choosing his words carefully. He apologized directly to Rashida and the court, explaining that he had not seen Rashida's exact movements clearly. and had instead taken her approach toward Yandi as a threat. He acknowledged that he should have handled the situation differently when he spoke about his fear of being separated from his children. Once again, cross-examination was brutal, as Rashida's lawyer questioned Meneses about his previous legal issues, implying a pattern of impulsive, violent behavior. Mendices struggled to remain composed under the barrage of accusations, his hands clenching and unclenching on the witness stand outside the courtroom. The media frenzy reached new heights, with every detail of the trial being dissected and debated across social media platforms, news outlets, and entertainment blogs. For days, fan theories flourished, with some claiming there was a conspiracy against men and others arguing Rashida was being unfairly vilified for speaking up for herself. In the midst of the chaos, private talks discreetly started behind closed doors. According to sources close to the case, both legal teams were considering a plea deal to avoid the uncertainty of a jury verdict. But pride and principle complicated matters. Rashida was reportedly unwilling to settle unless Menzies publicly admitted wrongdoing and accepted significant penalties, while Mendices was hesitant to enter a guilty plea to a violent crime. He insisted he had not intended to commit as the trial proceeded. Leaked footage from a different angle that showed the moments leading up to the altercation in greater detail surfaced online. Though it was unclear whether Rashida had actually moved aggressively toward Yandi, the footage reignited debate online and created a stir in the courtroom when it was used as evidence. The jury watched the video closely, their faces inscrutable, and legal experts conjectured endlessly about how the new footage might affect the verdict. Some arguing it supported. Closing arguments were intense and passionate, with both sides appealing to the jury's sense of justice and humanity. Rashida's lawyer asked them to consider the full context of the case and the devastating impact a harsh sentence would have on an already fractured family. Meneses' claim that he was protecting Yandi was contested by others who insisted that physical violence was never an acceptable response, no matter the provocation. As the trial came to an end, emotions ran high. Every hour felt like a lifetime. As the jury deliberated and every time the courtroom doors creaked open, every heart inside jumped with anticipation, only to crash back into anxious waiting when no verdict was announced outside. Outside, supporters on both sides held vigils, chanting, praying, and hoping for the outcome they believed was right inside the private confines of their homes. Yandande and Mendices clung to each other, alternating between hope and despair. Rashida tried to keep her cool, concentrating on her kids and her business endeavors, but the stress was overwhelming her. It had already been irrevocably altered when the jury returned. The courtroom was electric, with people crammed into every available space in a desperate attempt to hear the verdict that would determine so much. The judge called everyone to order, and the four people stood holding the envelope containing the verdict. Time seemed to drag on forever, with the agonizing men closing their eyes and praying silently for a brief moment. Rashida looked straight ahead, refusing to show any emotion, and Yandi squeezed Mendices' hand until her knuckles. The room went silent as the four people cleared their throats and started reading. Every breath was held, every heart was thumping with anticipation. And Mendices stood still, his face unreadable, waiting for the words that would change everything. The jury had found him guilty of misdemeanor assault, but not felony assault. Room erupted in a frenzied mix of gasps, cries, and whispers. Yandandani tightly gripped the men's hands as tears streamed down her face. A mixture of relief, and the judge swiftly restored order, his gavel slamming down with force. But the guilty verdict was enough to start a firestorm across the media. And within the love, Rashida fought verbally with both sides, each convinced of the righteousness of their cause. Manx addressed the media briefly, his voice heavy with emotion. And he expressed remorse once again, emphasizing that his actions were never intended to production on Love and Hip Hop. Came to a screeching halt as the fallout from the trial began to seep into every aspect of their lives. Rashida also made a statement, her voice strong but trembling. about the importance of standing up for oneself and that he hoped to find a way to make amends. Yundi stood by him, fierce and protective, declaring that they would get through this. As a family, insiders stated that Mendes would be permanently barred from filming, while others suggested that the controversy might actually increase viewership. Rashida's future on the show was also uncertain, with some producers worried that her presence would be too divisive, rekindling tensions that could no longer be contained behind closed doors. Discussions became even more heated, with some cast members taking sides, further dividing the group alliances, friendships dissolving quickly, and new rivalries emerging. Yanandi found herself cut off from old friends who thought Mendes had crossed an unforgivable, though it didn't justify the violence. It shed new light on the toxic environment that had fueled the confrontation. In the midst of the chaos, a surprising twist emerged. Private messages between Rashida and a senior producer leaked online, suggesting that certain scenes leading up to the reunion had been staged to provoke drama. Fans were split once more, with some demanding justice for Mendes and others doubling down on their support for Rashida as she was sentenced. Mendes faced the prospect of community service, probation, or jail time as the day drew near. His attorneys fought valiantly for leniency, pointing to his charitable endeavors and attempts to be a positive influence in his community. Letters of support poured in from fans, family members, and even some former critics who felt he deserved a second chance. At the same time, advocacy groups pushed for a harsher sentence, arguing that celebrities shouldn't be given a free pass for violent behavior within their homes. Mendes and Yandy struggled to maintain a sense of normalcy for their children, protecting them from the worst of the media coverage, but the tension was unavoidable. Nights were filled with whispered conversations, tears, and prayers. Yandandi frequently stayed up late reading through endless articles and social media posts, her mind racing with fear and worry. Men in DC tried to remain strong, but the guilt and uncertainty they knew were constant. Rashida also battled demons, and while many praised her bravery, she was subjected to constant online harassment and threats from people who thought she had ruined a man's life. The stress had a negative impact on her health. When sentencing day finally arrived, it felt like the entire world was watching, with fans and reporters glued to every word. The judge acknowledged the complexity of the situation, recognizing both men's remorse and the seriousness of his actions. After a long, tense pause, he handed down the sentence: 1 year of imprisonment. She withdrew from public appearances, instead focusing on her business endeavors and her family. However, the shadow of the incident loomed large, a constant reminder of how quickly everything could spiral out of control. Proponents of Minix celebrated the lenient sentence, viewing it as a second chance for a man who had worked hard to change his life. Critics, on the other hand, were incensed, accusing the system of once again favoring celebrities over regular people in debates. If Minix successfully completed the probationary requirements, which included 200 hours of community service and mandatory anger management classes, the misdemeanor conviction could eventually be expunged from his record. They announced plans to launch a new initiative focused on conflict resolution and mental health awareness in the hopes of turning their pain into a platform for healing and education. Rashida also broke her silence by releasing a powerful video message thanking her supporters and encouraging others to speak out against violence. The sentence was a bittersweet relief for Yandi and Men, as both sides passionately argued their points of view on social media, talk shows, and news programs. As the weeks went by, the Love and Hip Hop franchise struggled to recover from the scandal, and producers redesigned the upcoming season, promising a fresh start. She acknowledged the complexity of the situation, but remained steadfast in her belief that accountability was necessary for true healing. Her message struck a chord with many, receiving praise for its grace and strength, increasing emphasis on genuine narratives of character development and atonement. Some cast members discreetly left the show, unable or unwilling to overcome the rifts caused by the tragedy. Fresh faces were introduced, and a new story started to emerge, one that would examine the effects of celebrity, the demands of public life, and for men, the rope, the path to forgiveness.